We're delighted to have partnered with NordVPN again for this season. We partnered with them last year, and they are, of course, a supporter of Rangers FC as an official sponsor there. And best of all, we can give you an exclusive NordVPN deal. If you go to nordvpn.com/heart and hand, you will get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan and one additional month for free. Completely risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee with Nord. And look, I use this product. I would highly recommend it. I used to work in web, so I know how easy it is to steal people's data, especially if you're using a Wi-Fi system that is a shared one, or you're using 4 or 5G, then your details can be out there. With NordVPN, they're absolutely not. And there are other advantages to it as well. You can watch sporting events that maybe aren't being shown in your region. You can purchase flights from different virtual locations, and they do make your flights cheaper. This is very, very useful. What a price is in the UK isn't the same as what a price is in America or a price is on the continent. NordVPN can save you money. You can buy purchasing subscriptions from other countries at a cheaper price, and you protect your data while travelling and using public Wi-Fi. I keep coming back to that. Anyone who's at the hassle of a cancelled card will know what I'm talking about. So all you need to do is go to nordvpn.com/heart and hand, and you'll get a huge discount off your plan and 1 month additional free, completely risk-free. I urge you to do it.
Good evening and welcome back to Heart and Hand. This is Heart and Hand Extra, your second free show of the week. Joining me tonight we have, first of all, Martyn Ramsey. How are you?
Not bad, Adam. It's been a week.
It has been a week. I'm sure we'll dig into it. And of course we have David Edgar. David, hello.
Hello everyone. Yes, I can echo Martyn's week being statement there, and not because of the Queen of the South game.
No, I was going to say we'll maybe just talk briefly about that, or maybe the post-match of that, and dig into the hot topic, which is obviously the transfer window and the upcoming Old Firm game. Martyn, after the Queen of the South match, I believe you asked the manager if he was happy with the squad or if he expected any more signings coming in. I'm kind of paraphrasing there, and the vibe that he gave was he is happy, but we'll see what can happen. There's been a lot made of his post-match PSV comments. Rangers Review had a full transcript of them, and to be fair, he doesn't explicitly say he's expecting players to come in. He doesn't explicitly say that the funds will help to bring players in. He just talks very vaguely about kind of financial opportunities, which could mean a number of things. I think the inference maybe, or how fans have taken that, when we heard after Queen of the South what he said, and then ultimately what has transpired and that no one's coming in. How do you feel that messaging has came across?
Messaging has been poor. I mean, I wouldn't really put it at Gio's door necessarily. Certainly after a game like that where everybody is sky high, and you could, if you wanted to be legalistic, have a good old afternoon looking at what he said and breaking it down. I think most of us hoped, and it's probably that hope that turned into assumptions, that we had our business and our targets and our plan all set, our main approach, and depending on what our European football would look like, we might have one or two that we couldn't afford in July, but possibly could if things went really well, and we would try and make that happen. It's not a lot of time between the PSV game and obviously the deadline, but you do your early soundings out and get things kind of in place. I certainly assumed that naively. I think what definitely, a couple of things in messaging, Adam. Fans thinking that all of this money just rolls in, millions and squillions of it this week, is wrong. And it is, we are not swimming in cash. And there are arguments, if you really want to make them, about being prudent and about being sensible and understanding that this could be a one-off for a few years. We might not be here every year, and until we are there regularly, you don't really start to budget or to look in the market at that kind of level. The big issue for me was the tickets. And this is unbudgeted bonus income. We are probably paying one of, if not the highest prices for tickets of any support in the Champions League. And I said it just before it came out that if we did go to the max, there would be huge pressure then to do something with that cash. Anything. Just that little bit of extra that everyone can see we probably need or could do with. We could at least have that option. And that hasn't happened. And fans, rightly or wrongly, it's a perception game, Adam. The whole thing is. And I've been pretty consistent through years and years and years about complaining to rich men about not spending enough of their own money to pay for your hobby. But with the ticket thing, when we're asked to go far more than any other support in the competition and see nothing extra for that, then I think that hits fans a lot more viscerally than the kind of wider abstract numbers that get thrown around and have been thrown around all this year because of our success in terms of prize money and TV revenue and all of that. And I think that was a huge misstep. It placed a lot of pressure then on the remainder of this week, and it hasn't happened. We are going into a massive week with 3 away games that conceivably could go badly, could obviously conceivably go very well, and no one will care next Saturday night after a superb week. But, it is within the realms of possibility that this could be a tough week on the pitch, and you're putting undue pressure, I think, onto the manager, onto the squad with that decision. That's my take on the week.
It's a massive week coming up, definitely, but what's bigger than massive? Super massive month when you think we've got all the Champions League fixtures. We've also got Hearts away as well, so it's not necessarily make or break, but the next 4 weeks are crucial. David, it's being assumed, I guess, by most people, and obviously Andy has put a mega thread up on Twitter and has been very vocal about it, but it's been assumed that it is a financial decision by the board, by Ross Wilson, by whoever. We aren't going to invest any more in the squad. What's your take on that? Because the other side of that is that the manager and Ross Wilson are pretty happy with the business that they've done. They got players in early. I think everyone, with the exception of Ridvan, was in before the first game of the season against Livingston. They haven't lost anyone since then, anyone major to the team. So is there a school of thought that, rightly or wrongly, and I think most of the fans would disagree, but possibly that the manager is quite happy with his lot? He certainly seems that way in press conferences. Now, I know that no one wants to end up like Scott Parker in terms of speaking out against the board, so there might be an element of gameplay in there, but do you think it is as cut and dried as financial sustainability, blah, 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 we've got all this money in, it's a once in a lifetime or once in a few year opportunity with a qualification for Champions League, the Bassi money coming in, let's just keep a lid on it? Or do you think there are sort of two sides to that and maybe they are just quite happy with their lot anyway?
Well, you'd like to think that he was quite happy with his lot. The issue for us as fans is twofold. One, the one that Martyn pointed out, this was the week when the club asked us for, and actually took, came out my bank account, came out your bank account if you're a season ticket holder or CCCS, it came out your bank account this week. And that's a terrible look because the club always go for the top end. That's the problem in terms of perception, that the fans always go for the top end. If you've got like a list of prices that something might be, the club will always fall on the higher side. And that gets frustrating for supporters because it's great that Rangers are doing well. It's brilliant that we're going to get to experience all these wonderful Champions League nights, etc. But it doesn't magic more money up into your account to pay for it. And look, I get the argument that people will put forward, which is that, you don't have to go. But I think we all know as diehard football fans that is, it's like cutting off an arm to escape to escape being trapped in the rocks. You might have to do it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's your best option, your favoured option. So look, I think that fans did have an expectation because for years, Adam, we've been told get to the Champions League, the riches. If you don't get to
Yeah.
it, then that has an effect. So you can't blame fans after being told for years that this is what happens if you get here and there are bad consequences if you don't. I don't think you can use the excuse of saying, well, we haven't made the Champions League, so we can't spend a lot of money, and then make the Champions League and go, but we're still not spending any money. I don't think that the two of them are compatible. So I think that the communications were bad. I don't think that fans were made aware. Secondly, no one from the board has come out and explained what this financial model is, right? And that, to me, is enormous. That's what they should have been doing. They should have been coming out and saying, by the way, we're not going to be spending fortunes, regardless if we get to Champions League or not, just so you know. Now, fans would still have believed and hoped that we were going to, but then you would have been able to say, well, to be fair, we did tell you, we've been consistent. Nobody from the board has come out and said, boring talks, I get it, about sustainability and about what we're planning to do and about what the idea behind this is. I'll give you an example. A lot of people have mentioned, rightly, Edmonston House. The cost has been more than initially assumed. Building prices across UK, materials, etc., across the world have gone sky high, and that caused delays, right? Get it, fine. They've not said a word. We've had nothing from the club in terms of updates on, by the way, this has happened. And you need to treat supporters like grown-ups, because then if we can't handle that, if we get told that the actual truth and we can't handle it, that's on us. If we don't get told the truth and we can't handle it, that's on them. And I would argue that the board, probably post-Australia, probably feeling a bit bruised by it. And I strongly suspect that there was an element of that in the ticket pricing, by the way. I strongly suspect that they went, well, it's 180 quid because, well, we could have been going to
that
Australia.
Extra 3 million.
Yeah, 3 million.
For a meaningless game, yeah.
You were the ones that didn't want to go. You can pay for it. I think there was definitely an element. And I think there has been a sort of a kind of, if you like, hurt feelings element among the board about that. So they should have been out there. We should have had, ideally, Parker Bennett, but certainly Robertson out there telling us, look, this is the script, this is where we are, this is our financial stability model. And you mentioned there Andy McGowan, and he's on Heart and Hand's daily update today, if anybody wants to go and check that out. And Andy is quite sanguine. Andy's financial guy, and he says it's planning and it's for the future. Andy has a lot of pensions, whereas you guys know me, I'm kind of, I'll see what turns up, right? So I would have spent the money because that's who I am. He's different to that, and that's fine. And look, incidentally, I think you can go on social media and believe that everyone agrees with the three of us. I think most people agree with the three of us, but there's a lot of people agree with Andy. So there is, we can't say everyone thinks.
Yeah.
I did ask Giovanni Van Bronckhorst at the press conference today. I said, look, fans. A lot of fans, not all, but a lot of fans are disappointed. They expected players coming in. What do you say to that? And he said exactly what you mentioned there, Adam. He said, yeah, we looked, but we couldn't see anybody that was better than what we got. So I'm happy with the squad we've got. He spoke about keeping Kamara, and I think that was a factor that the manager very much wanted to retain Glenn Kamara. Now, here are probably a couple of the discrepancies between what the manager believes of the players and maybe what we as a fan base believe. The manager loves Glenn Kamara. The manager loves Scott Wright, and we see that he'll give Scott Wright many an opportunity. We maybe don't rate those players as highly as he does. Kamara's a great player, but I don't think as consistently. Kamara for me is becoming a wee bit like Brahim Hamdani. He wouldn't be out my team in Europe and he wouldn't be in it domestically. So that, I think, is a factor as well, that the manager has different perceptions. And at the end of the day, he's the guy that makes the decisions, and he's the guy whose job is on the line if he gets them wrong. So that's fair enough. You do have to, if you like, understand that he should be the guy that makes final decisions, but it doesn't mean that as fans that we can't disagree. I think that the squad has been bloated. We know that. Too many squad players, which incidentally doesn't happen by accident. There's this thing of, I've seen some people say, well, we can't bring in players because we've got this big squad. Well, that's bad recruitment. You shouldn't have brought them in. That's bringing in guys. That's bringing in guys like Simpson, etc., who weren't up to it. So yes, you're right. We did have a bloated squad. Secondly, there was the question in the summer. I said at the time I would have kept a Davis or an Arfield. I wouldn't have kept both.
Not both.
I think that McGregor offering another year when you were going to go with McLaughlin, would we have been better just saying, Robbie McCrory, you're the number 2 next season, want you challenging
Yep.
John? But, there are arguments to be made about decisions that were made a few months ago before we were in the Champions League that all pile up. So I suppose the long-winded way of saying is I personally can't believe we didn't sign anybody, because you cannot tell me, I'm sorry, I just do not believe that there wasn't one player in the whole of Europe who was available within our budget and better than what we have. I don't believe that to be the case, right? So then it is saying, right, okay, you chose not to go into the market. There must be money there. And look, we are all back of a fag paper accounts. I get that, right? I don't have Andy's understanding of football finances or finances in general. I'll accept that. But we see a lot of money coming into the club. We see a lot of money coming out of our accounts and going into the club.
And this is where the messaging is, Davey. This is where it comes down. What we can't ask for, what no club in the world does, is say, right, guys, here's what we have. Here's what exactly to the penny we work. And what football club in the world would even dream of doing that? Because it's uncompetitive. Nor do we want platitudes and management speak. That's management speak, David. I know you hate that. Well, what you want is something in the middle, and some better way of informing and educating and just managing expectations. So look, this year's been superb for obviously European success and what that's brought in prize-wise and TV revenue, ticket money. Here's why this does not mean we can go mental again the way we did in the past. But it just meeting us in the middle somewhere. And actually speaking, I couldn't agree with David more. The head of the club, they're becoming unaccountable, and we've had it in the neck this week, obviously, as we always do. Gio's not going to answer questions on ticket prices. He's not going to answer questions on use of budget. He will go as far as he can on the question that I asked on Tuesday, the question you asked today, David, as any football manager does. The people who we need to speak to, we with all due respect, we don't really get to, unless they have to come out and put a fire out about Sydney or whatever. But it's exceptional stuff, or want to sell something. So that's an issue. The only thing that I would pick up with David, and David and I have disagreed on this repeatedly on Seagulls or EPL show, we do have a choice. And nothing ever changes with running a football club, ever. When fans moan and complain and go on a kind of moral outrage whilst handing over their money to the people with whom they're raging. It's a facet of modern life that cracks me up. So we do have a choice. All I would say, and I don't, football's not allowed to sketch. The right price for tickets is how many are going to pay. I completely agree and accept all that. My own issue prior to the announcement, on the announcement, and for the rest of the week, is that by going to the max, you're creating huge expectations. And when you don't meet those, we're not in a great place mentally really going into a big week. That was my worry.
No, and that for me is the key thing. Also, if I can use a metaphor, I said to you guys earlier in the week, I love a good metaphor, me. Trident costs 15 billion quid, right? It doesn't work, and we couldn't hold the Russians back for more than 72 hours anyway. However, it costs 15 billion, so we all get to sleep in our beds at night relaxing, going, it must work, it must be good. It costs 15 billion, it's big and it's shiny. It's, as Sir Humphrey Appleby said, it's a nuclear weapon that Harrods would sell you. So that's what new signings can do. And sometimes you need that boost. Now, I'm not saying, somebody's going to say, you're saying sign players for the sake of it. No, I'm not. Because again, I go back to my point. Are we really saying that there wasn't a player out there at 2-3 million quid and a wage of maybe 20 grand a week that's better than what we've got? I don't believe that's possible. I'm sorry. I just don't. I think, we're short, for me, for a partner for Lundstrom. We have a lot of bodies, that's a different argument, but I think we're short of a quality partner for Lundstrom, and I think we're short of, and not a defensive midfielder, by the way, a kind of number 8 type, a passer, a guy who can make things happen looking forward. And I think we're short on the right wing, where we've got Matondo, way too early to judge. I know we as a support love doing that, but still quite clearly not there yet. And Scott Wright, who again, I think is held in much higher esteem by his manager than he's held by most of the supporters. So for me, there were gaps. They did need fixed. They could have been fixed and every signing's a risk. You could have bought in somebody, paid the money, we could all be quite happy, and in 6 months we're going, he's a diddy. That always happens. That's just football. You're never going to change that. But I still think that sometimes you need to look at it and say, right, realistically, what's the best for the club overall? This week has been what's been best for the balance sheet. And I suppose, Andy would argue directors have fiduciary duties, all that stuff. I would suggest that in the longer term, one, the perception, because that's what's happened with the ticket stuff. It's just more chipping away at the relationship between board and support. Won't hurt them this week, as Martyn says. Everybody will pay it, but it will hurt them in the future. And secondly, that ambience around the club going into crucial games, that is important, and you can't quantify it, but we all know it, and we can all see it. We see what the mood has been this week, going into 3 enormous matches. I'm very disappointed. They've made a mistake for me. They should have invested some of the money. If they weren't going to do that, and they should have, I reiterate, but if they weren't going to do that, we should have known weeks ago why they weren't planning to do it, unless something exceptional happened, and we didn't. So we got the worst of all worlds this week, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the perception is awful, and I completely agree with you guys. I think there's no way. I mean, none of us are experts in football recruitment, but you look at the signings that we've been able to bring in, even this summer, but in the last four summers, we're not talking about we absolutely have to spend £5.5 million on someone who's out of contract next year. We have lists and lists and lists of people. I refuse to believe that there was not one person available for something within our budget that could come in and impact the squad. So the financial side of it, the finance side of it for me is a red herring. I completely understand Andy is up in it and he understands it all, but he's basically saying there is no money to sufficiently increase the quality of the squad in this window, and I don't believe that to be the case, because bargains can be found. You can bring a loan signing in, as we've done in a few windows, if we really, really needed, or the club felt that we needed to bring someone in. So the only logical conclusion that I have is they didn't want to go and spend the money for the specific player that they wanted, possibly, but they didn't push the boat out because they were relatively happy with what they've got. The point about some additional messaging from the club, I mean, I think that would be great, obviously, but if you look at the two things that have come out in the last couple of weeks, with the Morelos being dropped, left behind, whatever, one word from Van Bronckhorst about being consulted, and social media's on fire after PSV, where everyone seems to infer of body language. His body language in that interview meant that we were signing players. Sometimes anything that the club will say, and I'm not defending them on the signings, etc., but sometimes anything they say will be picked up and torn apart. Maybe they are just better keeping stum a little bit and trying to let something ride, but I don't think it wasn't a wise move in this particular situation. I definitely think something would have been done to temper the expectations. On the squad as well, I mean, again, we get asked, why aren't you asking this question? Why aren't you saying bringing this player in? If you ask Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, why didn't you bring a right winger in? He said, I brought Matondo in and I rate Scott Wright. And then you just say,
that's it.
Okay, you're the boss. You know much more than we do. You have the context that we don't have. So he's not going to say, yeah, they're rubbish, aren't they? I really should have brought someone else in, and we've spent 2.3 million on someone 2 months ago that we don't think is great. Just because we haven't seen Matondo, it doesn't mean he's going to get. He's not going to throw him out with the baby out with the bathwater anyway. But they're just not going to say that, and they're just going to say that they are quite comfortable. We mentioned the squad, Martyn. I think there's a disconnect in the squad, and David mentioned squad players. We have, and I've been saying this for a while, we have a big squad, absolutely, but we have too many one-dimensional players, and it's been the case for years. I think probably why there's always been the moans and concerns about 10 of the 11 Rangers players played in the League Cup final when they played against Seville or whatever it was. I've made that one up, but generally over a 2 or 3 year period we didn't really change the starting 11, and to me that's because we're bringing in one-dimensional players, or we have one-dimensional players. Without getting into mega detail about it, to my mind, I think most people, and again David's point, most people doesn't mean everyone, but most people are of the opinion that we want to go and attack domestically. In home games, certainly, probably most of the away games as well. We want to go and attack, we want to get the handbrake off. we don't really need to bother ourselves with really detailed tactics about the opposition or how we're going to break this team down or that team down. We just want to go and attack. We are lacking in players that can do that, that can play with the handbrake off. If you think just one defensive midfielder, essentially 5 forwards or 2 attacking midfielders and 3 forwards, we are kind of lacking there in terms of, we've got numbers, absolutely, but Scott Arfield, Morelos, Roof, Sakala, Matondo, Scott Wright, Kamara, Jack, they aren't available to us, some of them. They maybe aren't trusted, some of them. They maybe don't fit in terms of what we want to do there. There is more than a handful, probably almost 2 handfuls that for that domestic purpose maybe don't fit right at this point in time. You add in the fact that the manager knew on Sunday that Tom Lawrence was going to be out for a month, and he's had 5 days to say, would I bring someone in to try and cater to that as well? So you're sort of left with guys like Lundstrom, Tillman, Kent, Cholak, Morelos when he comes back to form, but Morelos and Cholak probably won't play together, so that's a kind of moot point. Yeah. You're left with 4 or 5 players out of that kind of attacking 6 that can probably do what we think we need to do, which is beat the rest of the teams convincingly, things that we struggled to do last year. So while the squad is big, there's a disconnect there unless the manager gets a turnout of players that we maybe don't think he had, unless he changes something and tweaks something else to enable us to do that. So I can see both sides. I can see the squad being too big, but also when you actually drill down into it, there aren't a lot of options. We're talking about going to Parkhead or even going away to Ajax, and we're probably going to have to be playing Glenn Kamara as a number 10 again, which I don't think anybody really thinks is something that we'll be able to do against your Dundee Uniteds, etc. coming up.
Oh, there's a lot in there. I mean, I don't disagree. Glenn Kamara playing tomorrow or on Wednesday, I don't think it's an issue for the reasons that David's just kind of mentioned. The kind of big game, him and Lundstrom, or a Davis and Lundstrom, less so Jack and Lundstrom now, I think. But that kind of belt and braces, I have no issue with for these 2 games. Those tactical decisions, selection decisions, have not been what has caused us umbrage, I think, in the last during Gio's reign, really, I suppose. We got a glimpse of something on Saturday, admittedly at home to Ross County, but that's exactly the kind of game we're talking about, I suppose, with just Lunny and 5 forwards, effective 5 attacking players, with Lawrence and Tillman central, and defenders had to go to both of them at one time, and that was causing all sorts of space and all sorts of chaos. I think that's the kind of outlook we want to see for just about every league game, bar Celtic maybe. Certainly Celtic away. And especially the dynamism of Lawrence and Tillman central. It's very Rangers to have that taken away from you whenever you get a glimpse of it, because Lawrence is obviously out in the biggest month possible, and that's just a huge blow, but just a very typical one. What I guess that does say, and it comes to your point, Adam, is that we're thin on players who can just come in and do that same job. Yeah. So we are reliant, and this is the Morelos thing, by the way, for years. With the exception of Roof's contribution to the title winning season, I think that you're solely reliant on that guy scoring and playing to him, playing to his strengths, playing that particular way. That you don't have options that you trust completely and you can rely upon, and you can mix and match, keep people fresh, blah blah blah. So I agree. One dimensional is probably it, which then puts a huge responsibility tomorrow and for the coming weeks on the players you mentioned, Lundstrom, Tillman, Kent, Cholak, and so they're clearly going to have to step up. Whether Gio would have played the Ross County way, let's say next Saturday against Aberdeen, which is the question of real interest. It's these games, these away games, where we've, I think, generally felt the consensus is too conservative, too cautious. I think we've talked a wee bit about Gio really enjoys figuring teams out and really enjoys working on opposition and preparing. And that challenge, I think, excites him and excites his backroom team. And that's why Europe has been such a success. Rangers have never been found out by these teams. But the truth is, in Scotland, for the vast majority of games, you don't have to do that. Walter Smith didn't do that. It really was, lads, it's Hibs. Lads, it's Aberdeen. You're good enough. You're better. Here's a general kind of shape, and just go out and express yourself and be better, because you are. So I think he's maybe overthought. So I think it's been a combination of the recruitment, and that right hand side seems cursed at the minute. But we'll just have to wait and see if Matondo can come into a Rangers career. He would not be the first player to get over some doubters in the first few weeks, but yeah, I know what you mean, that there's a bit of bad luck there, obviously, with Lawrence as well.
David, one thing as well that we've also got is the feeling that Sands and Tillman money, possibly, not necessarily been ring-fenced, but if they both continue to progress in the way that they have, I think they'll both be seen as pretty decent bits of business next summer. However, I guess this is the I don't want to say negative, but this is one of the quirks of a loan to buy type situation, that you feel like they will already be your player, but you're then having to shell out quite a lot of money. I think in Tillman's case, it's probably not far off our third highest transfer fee if things go to plan. So it could work out to be a bargain, absolutely, but there is an element of that. We said that last year with Celtic, that you're paying 10 million, 12 million quid to effectively stand still. But we do also have all these contracts coming out next summer as well. So do you think there's a case of maybe we are comfortable relatively and we're kind of kicking the can down the road a little bit? Because as things stand right now, on the 2nd of September, we've got Philip Helander, Ryan Jack, Steve Davis, Scott Arfield, Alan McGregor, Robbie McCrory, Alfredo Morelos and Ryan Kent all out of contract next summer. Now, I'm no expert on it, but you have to be well over 100 grand worth of in wages there.
Easy.
Maybe closer to 200 a week. So again, but to me that just reaffirms my point that if it was me, I'd be bringing in one or two players that are seen as long-term replacements for them right now. In this summer of all summers, in terms of the finances that we've got available, I would be sort of succession planning in there a little bit and bringing in those players that we've spoken about, 21, 22, 23-year-olds that can come in and as a forward and as a sort of deeper midfielder to just try and get them into the team. That might be something we do in January, absolutely. It could be we could do a deal for someone who's out of contract in the summer. I'm not saying we won't, but when you've got that big situation looming as well, it means that we're looking at another 5 to 10 players coming in next summer too.
Yeah, and there is an argument that said that some of that trimming should have been done this summer. Yeah. That we kicked the can down the road, and I think that would be a legit criticism. Might prove wrong by the end of the season. I think, for example, Arfield, there was a lot of discussion about whether to keep him in, and I think he's already proven why he'll be useful to have around the place this season. So, but as you say, of that list, there's probably only two, realistically, that you're wanting to keep.
Yeah.
At the end of this season, realistically. So there is going to be a need to make some changes to the squad. Oh, and of course, some players who are there just now who are in contract won't work out and you'll want rid of, and that's natural wastage. That always happens, and you'll feel you want to freshen up the team in certain other areas. I just worry that, and Andy. Again, and we keep referring to Andy, folks. He's at Bob McPhail on Twitter. If you're on social media, you can see his big mega thread or listen to the daily update on Heart and Hand. I just worry that he's right about something, in that our expectations, my expectations as a fan, are different from what the reality is going to be. Because I don't know then how you marry the two. And the argument that I put forward is, well, if we're not spending this summer, when? And his argument is, we're not. Get used to it. This is what it is. And that's probably the thing that has frightened me coming out of this, that we are never going to be able to spend the sort of money I expect us to be spending on the back of financially successful years. And again, I didn't expect us to be in the £10 million market. Don't get me wrong. I did expect us to be in the 5, 6, 7 market for at least one, maybe two players, and we're not. And that concerns me a lot, because it is a case of whether or not we can afford it, but there's a conservatism because we don't want to do it in case we waste that money. That can happen. But again, you can have the most on paper perfect signing, and it just doesn't work out for whatever reasons, for personality reasons, for family reasons, for not settling in the city, 100 reasons. But that's my concern, that maybe my expectations are never going to be met, because that's just not how football currently works. And again, sorry to beat on about this and hit the same drum repeatedly, but again, then that's the kind of thing that needs explained to us. And to touch on something Martyn said earlier, people say, well, you're fan media, you can ask. We can ask, they won't answer.
Nope.
Of course, we've been asking. We can ask Gio at public press conferences, that's one thing, but he's just going to say finances are nothing to do with me. And then if you ask the people who finances are to do with, they don't do interviews. Douglas Park doesn't do interviews. Bennett, I've seen talk to Rangers TV a couple of times, but that's it. So, yeah, that sort of is my worry. The thing about this model, this fabled model, the model we keep hearing about, the thing about the player trading model is you can't expect to pick up Calvin Bassies for 230 grand and sell for 20 million. Right? It's brilliant if you can, but it's rare. It's really, really rare, which is why I've heard you refer to the Bassey deal as a lottery win, and it kind of is. What you're supposed to do is, when you start making that money, is you move up from those type of signings and you start buying the guys at £5, £6 million and then trying to flip them for 30, 40. That's sort of how it works. And I'm just concerned that we're not quite at that stage yet. And given the year we've had, you begin to wonder, when will we be? Because we can't take for granted Champions League qualification. We saw how difficult it was this year. The margins will always be razor thin about whether you get there, whether you don't. And I hope we do it year in, year out, but you can't guarantee it. And therefore, we're probably looking at a £100 million record turnover this year, but on average, I think in the future it'll be round about 70, barring something miraculous that we don't foresee at the moment. So that thought kind of depresses me a wee bit, Adam, if I'm being upfront with you here, because I kind of think that this seems to be the market that we are operating in, and if not now, when?
I think I completely agree with that. It's unrealistic to bring someone in on a compensation and sell them for 20 million. You are probably more likely, if you look at Yilmaz, for example, 3 million, does a great job this season. Maybe someone will come in with an offer for us, maybe around about, 15 million next summer, and you think,
20,
you think, oh, maybe we'll do that and we'll flip it, rather than hanging on for 25, 30 million offers. And as we see with Morelos, maybe that doesn't happen. So I think we probably need to realign our expectations in terms of, if we have a good player, it doesn't automatically mean they're going to be worth Calvin Bassey money. His skill set is so unique and so sought after in terms of that flexibility to play 3 different positions, left-sided, English, centre-back.
Powerful, with that incredible build, married to speed, married to technique. Guys like him, there's a reason that Ajax spent that money on. There's a reason that he's already doing well, and he'll probably end up getting flipped by them for a fortune. But that's what I mean about this model. Ajax don't just stick about the up to £3-4 million model. They sell big, and then they buy slightly bigger than they did the last time, and then they sell slightly bigger the next time. And that's sort of how I understood that this model was supposed to work.
And the profit will obviously be less, but what you would hope is that you get more from the player immediately. If you think of Bassey taking that season to get up to speed, and then we only really got 6 months out of him, if you have someone coming in at a higher quality level to begin with, then they can hit the ground running. You get 2 really, really good seasons out of them, and they go. Martyn, I totally get all the sustainability thing, and I think moving forward, absolutely, we have to sell before we can expect to buy in tens of millions of pounds with him. I'm absolutely on board with that. A relatively small pot of money there, 3 to 5 million. Outside of that, you have to sell to buy. I completely get that, but I don't think it is unrealistic to look at this summer in isolation and say, Gerrard money, Patterson money, Cedric Itten money, Aribo
Yeah.
money, Bassey money, Billy Gilmore money, whatever we got for Stephen Kelly, to take it to the extreme money, Europa League run that was unprecedented, wasn't budgeted for. We were told it was going to be Champions League level, therefore the assumption is that it's probably about 15, 20 million more than we got from Europa League, and then the same again from the Champions League. I don't think it is unrealistic for fans to be annoyed or for fans to be wondering. Sustainability for the coming seasons is absolutely fine, but you're just not, it's impossible for you to sell, and the ticket money and extra money coming in for that, it's impossible to sell that there wasn't anything right now to do something that would have improved the quality of the team. We can talk about appeasing the fans, we can talk about just doing something, but ultimately everybody wants a stronger Rangers on the park.
No one wants that, by the way, and this is why yesterday as a thing, this deadline day thing isn't such a big deal. I mean, we don't want Rangers to throw good money away just because they're panicking about fan reaction. That's not how you build a squad. I think deadline day is becoming a bit of, it's kind of finished now, isn't it, really? People used to take days off their work to watch it, and then football clubs get wise to the fact that this might make good telly, but doesn't really make good kind of football business sense. So we'll get who we want in at a better time. But you're absolutely right, and the fact that it hasn't happened needs to be explained. It's with the setup the Rangers have, and in terms of the people involved at the top of the club and everything they've done for the club in real terms. I don't mean giving sound bites on interviews and whatever, in terms of putting their own cash up front to rebuild and to give the club what they want. It is always difficult to be overly critical because that's always in the background. It's their money. But I think the notion of a Rangers chairman who doesn't really speak to the world, I have issues with. It's a very prominent public position in Scottish life. It's the biggest institution in the country. There needs to be a genuine leadership, I think, and that means communication. And it means having that kind of public role in Scottish life. So that's an issue, personally. And it goes a long way to just this gap, David and Adam, that exists, because Adam, you've rhymed off all of this income, and fans scratching their heads going, well, could we not have done more? Well, if we're ignorant to something, if we don't understand something, if there are issues that we're just not getting, those need to be explained. Otherwise, you get this rage and anger. Now it's Rangers fans, you will always have that. I get that. But if there is a knowledge gap, fill it. It shouldn't be that difficult. And because all you're doing, right, keeping stum and bunkering down, that's a short term kind of fix. It deals with things in the very, very short term, but it just builds and builds and builds long-term problems, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100% agree with you there, Martin. And I think that we live in a world where social media does exist, and just because the people at top of Rangers don't use it doesn't mean it's not a thing. And don't get me wrong, I don't really think Douglas Park should be on Twitter responding to.
No, that's not what I mean.
No, I know that. I know. I'm just reductio ad absurdum, mate. I was going for there, but even so, that it means there's a constant conversation, and it means that if there is a vacuum, people tend to fill it themselves. We've seen this week the rumour James Tavernier was out for tomorrow, and Giovanni Van Bronckhorst at press conference saying, "Yeah, I heard that. I don't know where that came from. He's been training." So. You know, we know that it'll happen. In the old days, it used to be a taxi driver would tell you the rumour, and you might repeat it in the pub, and that's, you know, how it would get about. But
and Scotland would pick their team accordingly, yeah.
And Scotland would pick their team because Rui Barros wasn't playing, and lose 5-0. But I just tend to think that you can't keep doing this on the grounds that it doesn't affect the people at the top of the club, so therefore it doesn't get done. And that is what it is at the moment. It does affect the people who work at the club on a day-to-day basis, incidentally. Look, we know, you mentioned earlier, Martin, we get it when things happen that people don't like on social media. This week we got blamed for Rangers not spending any money in the transfer market. We get, someone literally did get in touch with us and tell us it was our fault that Scott Wright gets picked by Rangers. All these things that we're powerless about. The people who aren't powerless about them do need to explain. Gio, to be fair, is brilliantly media trained, by the way, and doesn't give much away, but he is there to at least answer questions. And whether or not you're happy with the answers, that's a completely different thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to agree. Even if the top of the club were more accessible, we're not all going to agree, and that's part of adult life, and that's also fine. But at least we have a more informed conversation. The three of us, fans in pubs, fans in buses, there's something to latch on to. Now, again, beware, of course, of the chairman who's never off the fucking telly. The David Murray era would tell us that as well, and it's all nonsense, it's all flim-flam and all that. Of course, there is another side to that. But as always, there's a middle ground that is grown up and just long-term is the better option, because it gets people on side. And we're kind of repeating ourselves, but it's creating an unnecessary tension at the start of a big week.
It didn't need to happen, yeah.
It didn't need to happen. Now, if this is a tricky week on the pitch, you're going to have tensions between the club and the support that we probably haven't seen since 2015. And
it's going to be
unnecessary is more the issue. Sometimes you just have fights, right? Sometimes they're just, we believe this and we believe that, and there's a dialogue, but no one's really changing much, and that's fine. That's part of life. I just think this is so avoidable. A lot of this was so avoidable by just being better at getting where they are over. Again, as I said, without putting all the complete detail in front of us, because no one's asking for that. That's ridiculous. But I think there's a middle ground being missed.
Yeah, there's always going to be people, as you mentioned there, who say, well, I don't like the answer, so therefore I'm going to still rage. That's fine, but then you leave them to it. It's no longer valid. You can rage away if you don't like the answer, but you've had your answer. When you don't have even the answer, then morally they're in the right, because they're looking for information that isn't, I think, outrageous to ask for. Just an explanation of why didn't you do this? I'm a paying customer. I expected this for that. Why didn't it happen? I really don't think that's an extraordinary demand.
Do you think the one, I'll go back to this, I think we do lack this kind of public leadership. Prior to Gio, Gerrard filled that void. Gerrard is a massive figure in football. He's a massive character. You could point to him and say that there's the club's leader, without question. Now, I like Gio, a lot of time for him, and a different manager, different person, far more relaxed, doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low, which I personally like in a football manager. Who's the club's leader? The
club's leader is Douglas Park.
Who is the public leader? Who's the public face of the football club? It was Gerrard, because he naturally fitted that kind of role.
And Gio doesn't want to do it.
I don't think it's his thing. He wants to be a football manager.
He wants to be a football manager.
Tough. This is Rangers. And it's a football manager here as a president. He's very good at
not doing it, if you know what I mean. It's not going to change. He's very good at going out there and saying very little and revealing nothing, and then going back into his world as a football manager. So fair play to him for that. It shouldn't be an automatic part of his job description, Martin. It shouldn't be, you need to do this. It should be, he's not going to do this, but he's, the football coach we want. That's what we hire them to do. Ergo, one of us, the boardroom or the chief exec, have to take this mantle. That's where the failing is for me.
But that's Rangers. There's a part of that, I'm afraid, we just can't get round. The office of the Rangers manager is it is more than just working on the grass. We know that. But all I meant was that Gerrard was such a personality, such a force of personality, that I think he stood in for that role entirely. And
yes, but you nailed it there. He stood in. He did a job that wasn't supposed to be his, and it shouldn't be his, because football managers come and go. We have a bad week followed by another 3 bad weeks, there's a fair point Giovanni Van Bronckhorst is out in his backside, right? That's just football. At any club, that can happen to you. So it needs to be somebody who's going to be there, because that person should explain that decision. Should it have to take place? You know what I mean? It's just, and nobody's saying that we need the end. I go back, incidentally, that I think that you can draw a straight line to Australia. I think that their feelings got hurt. I think they felt bruised by what went on. And I think that they made the change and then they hunkered down, but I think they're still hunkering down. And I think now that hunkering down, whether or not you believe there's an us and them between the board, there is a perception that there's an us and them between the board. And that, I think, is destructive at any club. But can I just say, in summing up, before we kind of move on to tomorrow to wrap up, can I just say, just to avoid confusion for anyone listening, we think they should have spent more money. We don't like what happened this week, and the tickets were too expensive. Just so we can't be misquoted.
And if anybody thinks that we are in any way responsible for Scott Wright playing, then have a look at every lineup I've probably ever suggested on Twitter in history. I think you'll see otherwise, but that's by the by. I'm just kidding. That's probably a bit mean on Scott Wright. 49 minutes nearly, Martin, of all the off-field stuff that I absolutely love. Shall we chat about
right up your street? Yeah.
Shall we chat about the real quiz? Tomorrow, there is obviously this school of thought. We're speaking about all these transfers, etc. The next 4 games, any new signings that come in either probably aren't really going to feature / make an impact, or we probably, the types of players that we're talking about coming in maybe aren't even necessary for these 4 games. We've got Celtic away, Ajax away, Aberdeen away, Napoli at home. First 2 Champions League games in well over 10 years, and probably our 2 most difficult, certainly historically, away fixtures.
Yeah.
First one tomorrow. We're in this situation now where we could be 5 points behind. Obviously, not ideal at this very, very early stage in the season. You could say it's unavoidable, but I think you could say, well, it's unavoidable if Willie Collin wasn't the referee as well. So I kind of take that point. How do you think it's going to go is one of the worst questions I think I've ever asked. But what's your thoughts and feelings on where we are, I guess, and where Celtic are at this moment?
Well, how do you compare it to others, don't you? People naturally do, especially me, who always lives in the past. I was sick the week before that game in February. I think I could see what did eventually come. I could see that writing on the wall. Don't feel that way at all about tomorrow. Was really happy with what I saw Gio do at Hampden and at Parkhead, the final game of last season. Not too much riding on it. The kind of energy maybe had disappeared out the league season, perhaps for both teams by then. But still, again, I go back to this. When it is a big challenge, I think he enjoys having a look at that and really getting into that detail. So I'm not right. It's an off-firm game. It's away. We could lose. That's not inconceivable. But I'm not overly concerned. They're obviously on a huge run that comes from last season. Have they really played anyone yet this season? Don't think so. So it's a big jump for them for the first time. It's their first game and their first proper game in months, I would suggest. So they're going to have to continue or find new gears that they probably haven't been using. And by that I don't mean smashing goals in against the kind of teams that they have. So I'm not overly worried. I'll be nervous as anything, of course. Tomorrow that's standard when it comes to these games. I'd be more sure that we'll draw next Saturday by Tawdry than lose tomorrow, because that's just what I see this Rangers team doing. I think we'll be all right tomorrow, to be honest.
Yeah, it's this frustrating paradox that we find ourselves in, as we say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just I hate to be in total agreement, Martin, but can I just back up here? I'm more worried about Pittodrie than I am about Parkhead,
Definitely.
And that, I think, says an awful lot about this Rangers team. I'm more worried about Pittodrie than I am about the Amsterdam Arena.
Yeah,
easily.
Because and it's really strange that I think, first of all, there's a lot of kind of online panic which there always is, about any subject. But I still think there's an interesting debate to be had about our fans, some of our fans, not all, have whether or not it's an inbuilt or whether or not it was developed over the last 10 years, there's a fear of Celtic that comes up really quickly. Celtic are playing really well, they're scoring loads of goals. Yes, they are. There's no doubt about that. So are we, right? We've had a disappointing draw against Hibs, and there were other factors in that. The rest of the time, been absolutely fine for what we've needed to do. Really just one dreadful showing, and that was USG very early in the season. I think that because of the last few years, that there's not far below the surface a tendency to just go, oh my God, we've got to Parkhead and treat it like we're off to play PSG. And I don't see that. Celtic are a very good side and they can tear you open if you let them. But that's a big part of it. You need to let them.
Yeah.
Now, Rangers should be strong enough to A, be able to cope with that, and B, be able to cause problems ourselves. We've seen that Rangers are strong enough to be able to cope with that. We saw it twice at the end of last season. So the idea that we should somehow be worried about them, I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about us, because if we don't show up, and that can happen, then forget it. If we don't compete and don't stand up to the pressure that they'll put on us, then we'll lose. But it's the exact same when they come to Ibrox.
Yeah.
That is always going to be the case. That's what you would expect in an Old Firm match. For me, I'm confident that the side will go out and perform at a good level. I'm confident we'll get a result. Speak to me next Saturday morning, even with 2 wins, and dear God, please, then I'll still be concerned that our players will look past it and look to and that was why I wanted players in. It's not that I don't think we've got a really good first 11 and 3 or 4, maybe even 5 good options to come in after it. It's not that I don't think the manager will tactically set us up correctly in big matches. He has more than proved that he will. And it's now a case of saying, though, that sometimes our players, for whatever reason, probably subconsciously, but they drift into a slightly complacent mode where they start slowly, sometimes leave themselves too much to do against a side who are playing their cup final. I would imagine that tonight they're all hyper as if it was PSV away because it's Celtic away. My concern is when it isn't a team like that and a team that they should beat and they expect to beat, that I'm not sure that the focus is always quite what it should be.
Yeah, I think what we're probably saying there is that we don't feel we've got a quality issue in the squad. There's maybe just a skill set issue, and that game out of the 4, Aberdeen away, absolutely sticks out to me as well. The skill sets that we have in the squad are better suited to these tougher games, if you want to call it that, which is the frustrating thing. In essence, we can do the hard part really, really well, and we don't have any concerns about it. But what you would hopefully class as the easier or the more mundane side of it in terms of the league domestic campaign, 10 men against the ball, skill set wise, we're a little lacking there. That being said, Martin, as you mentioned, that February game, the first half, horrendous. We can talk about the second half, whether Celtic sat back, whether we got to grips with the changes that we did, whatever. But ever since that, I think we've probably had the upper hand, I would say, in terms of performances. Yes, the Ibrox game, we had the mistakes, and I think that was the difference in that game, was those mistakes that we made in the goals. We got very overexcited with Aaron Ramsey's goal, and we didn't sort of just take a breath and let them come on to us for 10 or 15 minutes and almost puff themselves out, if you like. So I think that one, to me, chalks down as unlucky. I think if we're looking at that on another day, that's probably a draw. The other games that we've mentioned, yes, some of them are dead rubber, but League Cup semi-final, Scottish Cup semi-final, I thought we handled very, very well. Weathered a storm, mini storm really round about their goal, came back, got ourselves in the game. We speak before about dealing with these negative punches and still coming back into the game. We hadn't. I think we'd had that conversation. We hadn't really done that under Van Bronckhorst up until that moment.
So Scotty Arfield just swung at that, really, to be honest.
Yeah, and then we ended up having a few of them round about that. Braga, Leipzig. So that's there now. I guess that's in the psyche, if you like. I don't think we can be too optimistic or too pessimistic about tomorrow. I think it's a good tactical battle. The manager now if he gets a feel for a team after one game, as he seemed to do in February and as he seemed to do in the Europa League run, if he's now got a feel for a team that's never going to change, you know exactly who's going to play, what's going to happen, what they're going to do. We have to feel relatively confident that we can back the manager on this one.
I think the manager and the players will be very comfortable tonight. I think they'll know their jobs, and in terms of going to do their work, I think they'll be. I think they'll be genuinely relaxed, not in a bad way. But I think exactly as you said, they know what's coming. The selection will be sensible. It wasn't sensible in February, and clearly there was just this post-break funk there as well, which didn't help. So no, again, anything can happen. It could just be a toss of a coin, referee decision, blah blah blah. But there'll be no tremors tonight, and amongst that squad, I think they'll be pretty happy knowing what they've got to do. As fans, you just wish Lawrence was there. He seems like the kind of player that might thrive. He could get sent off as well, and I think that's a movie we'll see eventually. But he could just come up with something from range, and it's just so typically Rangers that we lose him. When's the last time we went there with a full strength? I mean,
it's never happened in my lifetime.
Nah, it's just every single time there's something. But that's football, and we'll just have to deal with it.
David, last time we went to Parkhead, as you mentioned, we went with no strikers. We've now got two. I think press conference, Morelos is in the squad. Is that correct? How do you think we're going to approach it in terms of lineups with that Lawrence blow with Morelos coming in? Do you see him, I assume, coming off the bench rather than starting?
Yep. I think that it's. I think the team picks itself a wee bit. I think given who's available, and then Gio, he very much goes with the way an individual match is going in terms of how he uses his bench. So hopefully, it's nice to have that option, but it's hopefully one we don't need.
Yeah, I think so. Martin, what about yourself? Obviously, we've got the same decisions around who's going to play next to Lundstrom and who's going to play wide right as we've had since, well, not necessarily Lundstrom, but as we've had since probably about 2018. What's your thoughts on that? I guess the rest of it probably picks itself, but what's your thoughts on those two problem points, if you want to call it
that? Lundstrom and on the right?
Partner on Lundstrom and on the right, yeah.
It'll be Kamara, I'm pretty sure. And yes, we're the same players that we've had for a while. That's still the issue, and I don't disagree with that. I think it'll be right tomorrow. And again, I have less concern about that at Parkhead than I do when Rangers would be expected to be proactive away from home and really go and thread the needle and just consistently overrun a team. He does work hard, a decent outball. I don't have huge issues with that. I do in other games, to be honest, but that's what I expect tomorrow.
I think for me, just to wrap up, I think it'll be, or I hope it will be Davis next to Lundstrom. I think just in terms of that controlling the play, if they are going to swarm as early doors, just someone in there with a bit of a cool head who can take the ball from Sands and McLaughlin and get things moving. My hope is it's that, and I think possibly Tillman off the right with maybe Scott Arfield in behind Čolak. Obviously, Arfield, as we know, doesn't always do great when he's not starting the game, but he's got 4 goals this season. I think that makes him second top goal scorer in very, very limited minutes. So that's an interesting one for me, but I think it might be that. Reason for that, I think, is if we mirror what happened away to PSV. I know Kamara played, but in terms of the attacking options, maybe the assumption was we'd go with pace on both sides, but we went with maybe a bit more technical ingenuity, if you like. So that could be an option for me, but I think we are talking about 3 or 4 of the same players that are going to fill those 2 spots. Okay, that will do us for tonight.
Sorry, just before we do, just one last thing. They're a good side, but let's not overbuild this. Let's not go into this thinking, oh my God, look at what we're up against. We're up against a team that we've beaten better than already this season. If we go there with the right approach, the only time we haven't gone against them with the right approach was the 3-0 at Parkhead. If we go there with the right approach, be aware of what we're going to face up early, then we're going to get the result.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to finish with this, and I always get it wrong, so I'm going to try my best, David, but I kind of forget. So I'd like to thank our producers in London, Paul Myers and Mike Lee, not Mike Myers.
Well done. No, not Mike Myers, thankfully.
David, thank you for joining us.
A pleasure. Thank you, Adam.
And Martyn, thank you.
No bother, mate.
And once again, thank you all for listening, and we very much hope your team wins.